Mama Stanwell's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she lounged in her plush bed. Ibisi's presence still warm beside her. She had him right where she wanted him, under her control, bound by threads of desire. But little did she know, a subtle threat lurked in the shadows. In another corner of the compound, Mama Pilot, a married woman, felt the weight of her loneliness. Her husband, a taxi driver, was always on the road, leaving her to her own devices. Mama Pilot's gaze often wandered to Nubisi, the young tenant who had moved into the compound. She found excuses to visit him, asking for help with minor tasks or simply chatting with him. Nubisi, oblivious to her intentions, would smile and assist her, unaware of the spark that had ignited within Mama Pilot. As the days passed, Mama Pilot's visits became more frequent. She would find reasons to knock on Nubisi's door, her heart racing with anticipation. Mama Stan, sensing a potential threat, watched with growing unease, her mind racing with strategies to keep Nubisi firmly in her grasp. Mama Stan's eyes narrowed as she watched Mama Pilot's frequent visits to Nubisi's quarters. She could sense the younger woman's intentions, and it didn't sit well with her. Mama Stan had grown accustomed to being the center of Nubisi's attention, and she wouldn't let anyone, especially not a married woman, like Mama Pilot, threaten her hold on him. As the days went by, Mama Stanwell began to tighten her grip on Nubisi. She would summon him to her quarters at all hours, demanding his attention and affection. Nubisi, caught in the middle, struggled to balance his obligations to Mama Stan with his growing sense of unease. Meanwhile, Mama Pilot continued to weave her web of seduction around Nubisi. She would brush against him accidentally, her touch sending shivers down his spine. She would bat her eyelashes and smile, making Nubisi feel like he was the only man in the world. As the tension between the two women escalated, Nubisi found himself trapped in a game of cat and mouse. He knew he had to tread carefully, lest he incur the wrath of either Mama Stan, or Mama Pilot, but as he looked into Mama Pilot's eyes, he couldn't help but feel drawn to her. Mama Pilot's hands moved deftly as she washed her clothes in the compound, the soap suds glistening in the sunlight. Nubisi, seeking refuge from the heat and darkness of his house, had wandered outside, his eyes drawn to Mama Pilot's lithe figure. As she worked, Mama Pilot's gaze flicked up to meet Nubisi's, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Nubisi, you're always alone, she said, her voice low and husky. Don't you ever get lonely? Nubisi shrugged, feeling a flutter in his chest as Mama Pilot's eyes seemed to bore into his soul. I'm used to it, he replied, trying to sound nonchalant. Mama Pilot's smile deepened, her eyes glinting with curiosity. You've never had a girlfriend? She asked, her voice dripping with innocence. Nubisi's cheeks flushed as he hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Mama Pilot's gaze seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a subtle challenge that left him breathless. As they talked, Nubisi couldn't help but notice the way Mama Pilot's loose-fitting dress clung to her curves, the neckline dipping low to reveal a tantalizing glimpse of her cleavage. He felt his pulse quicken, his mind racing with forbidden thoughts. Mama Pilot, sensing his gaze, smiled to herself, her hands moving with a newfound slowness as she washed her clothes. The air seemed to vibrate with tension, the sound of the water and the rustle of the clothes, the only soundtrack to their charged conversation. Mama Pilot's eyes sparkled with mischief as she asked Nubisi, so, do you have a preference for older women? Her voice was laced with innocence, but Nubisi couldn't shake off the feeling that she was probing for something more. Nubisi's cheeks flushed as he hesitated, unsure of how to respond. He knew that Mama Pilot was aware of his relationship with Mama Stan, and he wondered if she was trying to gauge his level of commitment. Mama Pilot's gaze seemed to bore into his soul, as if she could see right through him. I mean, some men prefer older women, she continued, her voice dripping with sweetness. They say we're more experienced, more knowledgeable in certain matters. Nubisi's heart skipped a beat as he met Mama Pilot's gaze. He knew that he was treading on dangerous ground, but he couldn't help feeling drawn to her seductive charm. I don't know, he stuttered, trying to sound nonchalant. I've never really thought about it. Mama Pilot's smile deepened, her eyes glinting with amusement. Well, maybe you should, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the water. Maybe you should consider what it would be like to be with an older woman. Nubisi's heart racing, He felt a shiver run down his spine as Mama Pilot's words hung in the air. She had begun to open up to him, telling him about her husband's neglect and infidelity. He's always on the road, chasing after those young girls, she said, her voice laced with bitterness. He doesn't care about me, about my feelings or my needs. I'm just a convenience to him, a place to rest his head when he's tired. Ibisi's eyes widened in sympathy as Mama Pilot's words painted a picture of a loveless marriage. He couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for her, and Mama Pilot's eyes seemed to gleam with satisfaction as she saw the empathy in his eyes. Mama Stanwell, watching from afar, felt a growing sense of unease. She didn't like the way Mama Pilot was looking at Ibisi, the way she seemed to be drawing him in with her words. She felt a pang of jealousy, wondering what they could be talking about. As Mama Pilot continued to talk, her voice dropping to a whisper, Ibisi felt himself becoming more and more entranced. He couldn't help but feel drawn to her, to the pain and vulnerability she seemed to embody. I'm so lonely, Ibisi, she will say, her eyes locked on his. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of emptiness. Ibisi's heart skipped a beat as Mama Pilot's words seemed to wrap themselves around his soul. He felt like he was being pulled into a web of desire, one that he might not be able to escape. And Mama Stan, watching from afar, felt her jealousy boil over into anger. The following day, Ibisi's afternoon was interrupted by a knock on his door. He opened it to find Mama Pilot standing in the doorway, a hint of a smile on her face. Ibisi, I need your help with something, she said, her voice husky. I have a nail stuck in the wall of my kitchen, and I was wondering if you could help me remove it. Ibisi's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded agreeably. Of course, Mama Pilot, I'd be happy to help. As he followed her to her kitchen, he couldn't help but notice the way her dress clung to her curves. The fabric was thin and transparent, revealing more of her body than he was comfortable with.